Right on. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Professor Laney Strange. My pronouns are she, her. I am a computer science professor at Corey College at Boston campus in Northeastern University. I teach computer science and data science and all over the spectrum, including in a program that we have called the Align program, which is a master's in computer science for if you do not have a bachelor's in computer science, because we care a lot about CS for everyone, is something you might hear from those of us from Northeastern. And today we are going to have a wonderful panel with two wonderful people, and we're going to be talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and the future of tech talent. So when we're talking about the future of tech talent, right, we're talking about, again, what we believe at Northeastern is that CS is for everyone. Anyone can study and succeed in computing. That can mean computer science, it can mean data science, cybersecurity, it can mean AI. And as AI has been changing and evolving rapidly over the last couple of years, what does that mean for tech talent? What does it mean to work in computing? What does it mean to be valued in computing? It looks a lot different now than it did a few years ago. And so we have our two wonderful panelists here who are going to come and talk about that. Nick and Peggy, come on up, please. Yeah. So I'm hoping to just start with introductions. If you would all just each please introduce yourself, whatever you'd like to share about your job or your role.
So my name is Peggy Tsai. I'm really happy to be here tonight. Yesterday, if you asked me, my role was actually a chief data officer at Big ID. I resigned, and now I'm moving on to being an AI product manager at a bank, JPMorgan Chase. So my background has always been around data and analytics. And working in financial services companies, I've worked at companies like Morgan Stanley, AIG, and really thinking about how AI, data and analytics have really formed the governance around AI governance. So in the last 5 years, I worked for a software company around privacy and security. So I really learned all about that space around AI regulations and really how privacy plays an impact on that. And what I'm trying to say is AI has really played an impact on the future, but there's a lot of foundational concepts around data, and that's where my background is.
Awesome. Thank you, Peggy. Nick?
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick Peddy, he, him. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Clear. You might know us from the airport if you travel at all. That's us. Hopefully be on the airport soon, too.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I do have some questions here for our panel, but we do also welcome questions from everyone. So if you want to jump in, just raise your hand. Let us know. Happy to hear from anyone. Right? Oh, already, yeah.
Well, right out of the gate. That's bold, man.
I love it. I love it.
Hi, I have a simple question. Can you explain in details what is artificial intelligence for you and what that means for us?
Yeah, great. What is artificial intelligence?
So for me, from more of a data point of view, artificial intelligence has traditionally been more about machine learning. And that is taking large types of data, information, essentially, to use to either predict or understand trends in what's going to happen next. So it's a lot of, for me, data like analytics, understanding really, for me, trends. When I think about artificial intelligence, it's a very large umbrella of things that include analytics, machine learning, and now I think what's important, the new type is now generative AI, being able to create new content based on information that's already known. So because artificial intelligence has been around for centuries, I mean, I don't think AI, the term is new. I mean, I remember growing up watching, Jeopardy and IBM Watson beating a human on a game, right? AI has been around. We've used AI in all types of things, just hasn't really been really popular and really mainstream, and I think until ChatGPT really came around. And if my parents and grandparents can understand it, then I feel like what I'm doing makes sense. But that's just my layman's terms.
No, I'm going to agree with Peggy, actually, but it's going to sound like I'm not at first. AI is nothing. So the term artificial intelligence was coined in the 1950s by Alan Turing to sort of describe this umbrella term of the notion of machines thinking like humans, right? It doesn't actually mean anything itself. To Peggy's point, if you sort of were to build a taxonomy tree of like AI, like the the phylum, genus, sort of species tree, right? It would start at the top of AI, and underneath that would be artificial general intelligence and artificial narrow intelligence. Artificial general intelligence is science fiction, you guys. That doesn't exist. This isn't going to exist anytime soon. It's not going to exist in our lifetime. That is not something that this is. Artificial narrow intelligence is everything that anybody means in AI when we say AI, right? And narrow intelligence is defined by, like Peggy said, several different kinds of techniques that are meant to emulate various aspects of a human brain. The one we're most familiar with most recently is around machine learning, deep learning, machine learning. That is models taking data and then learning based on that data how to predict the same kind of data, right? More recently, we have generative AI, which is learning about data and then learning how to create that same kind of data, right? But there are other kinds of techniques as well. In the 80s, there was expert systems, right? In the 70s, there was, even further back, right? Like there's all kinds of different kinds. Funny enough, this is a good question because if you look back all the way to the 1950s, we humans get all excited about AI about once every decade. About once every 10 to 12 years, something happens, some new advancement, some new technology. And we go, oh man, here we go, AI, it's gonna happen. And then like after a couple of years, we go, oh, no, it's not really useful yet. And then we kind of move on, we forget about it for a little while, and then we kind of come on, right? This is different, right? We're past that point in history now where we go, oh, this doesn't really work. So this one sticks, I think, and does represent a step function in an industrial revolution, which, back to your original question, I think will probably end up redefining AI for us, right? Because to make an early point, right, when we said AI before, what we really meant was machine learning, right? Now when we say AI, we have to differentiate. I mean generative AI. I mean machine learning AI, right? We have to, it's going to become, so I think the definition is going to change pretty soon.
We were so excited for movie phone in the early 90s. That was the AI of the time. Didn't quite take off.
Oh, that's a great pull.
So I wanted to ask a question about, we have a lot of folks here who work in tech or tech adjacent spaces. And I wonder if you could talk about in what ways you see someone who we might generally call a technologist as a creator of something like an AI system or a user of an AI system. Where's that line?
Okay, so I'm going to again say Nick is probably going to talk more about the creating, because I see that as more on the engineering side, and there's certainly a lot of roles on that. I think I'll cover more of the user aspect of it, because my point of view is there's always going to be new technology, right? That will always exist, whether it's new AI technology or new quantum or new types of technologies coming about. For me, regardless of your role in technology or whatever your role in the company, it's really to understand how can companies incorporate different types of technologies and make sure that it adds to business value. How do you create business value? And depending on the company you work for, whether it's Clear or Walmart or a retail company or for a bank, they have different business objectives and very clear ways of making money, making customers happy, keeping customers retained, and those are different what we call KPIs, like key performance indicators. So regardless of your role, it's important to utilize technology in a way that adds value, being more efficient. So many of the conversations I have with customers is how do you incorporate the new generative AI, like a chatbot or a ChatGPT? Why do you purchase more licenses for a Gemini or Claude? It's to make yourselves more efficient in your work. So productivity and efficiency, time savings are currently the ways to measure and justify the cost of purchasing and developing AI. I think that will quickly change because now companies need to think about additional ways to generate new money, not just cost savings. So how do you actually create new products or gain new market share? That's a very business-oriented way of thinking about AI. So certainly thinking not just about the technology itself, but think about the utilization of the technology, and business processes exist and will continue to exist, but how do you be more productive and effective using all types of technologies, including AIs, because that is not a siloed type of technology. AI is really incorporated into all aspects of compliance, legal, finance, all parts of the organization.
I strongly agree with you. Like it's not a exclusively technologist tool at all. I agree that today it requires an engineer to build the model, to create the model. I think that actually changes pretty soon too. I think the interesting thing about technology, going back to what I said earlier about this time is different than other sort of rounds of AI, is that, actually we just saw this recently with DeepSeek. Everybody saw the article about DeepSeek, right? They used models to train other models. Right, and that was much faster and much more efficient. Right, it's the same thing. Like the power this tool gives everybody now, regardless if you're a technologist or not, is it democratizes everything. Now everybody can have a baseline capability of anything. Right, and personally, for example, I still code in my spare time. I'm terrible at front-end code. I'm terrible at making web pages. I hate it so bad. I'm so bad at it. I offload all of my front-end web dev to my ChatGPT companion. Right, you do this. Right, and that means I don't have to know anything about it. I can still develop a decently good front-end and not have to worry about it. I'm also terrible at SQL. Thank God for ChatGPT. So the point is that it creates this ability that you didn't have before, at least at some baseline level, right? You're not going to be an expert with ChatGPT, but you can be something, right? And from that, I think if you pull on that thread and sort of follow it to its in the fullness of time, the logical conclusion, pretty soon models training other models is like that's a Saturday afternoon, right? That's anybody can do that. What do you need your model to do? Cool, just whip it up real quick, right? I think it becomes not a technologist dominion at all. I think that's the really transformational aspect of this technology.
So Peggy, you were talking about sort of these kinds of tools making us more efficient and aiming for more productivity. Do you think we're going to get to the point where people aren't needed at all to write the code?
I think there are certainly roles that will go away. But what I emphasized, so I also teach an executive program on data and AI. I focus on the critical thinking. I think that's where you need people to verify and validate the code, but also think of new ways to use it, right? You can't just continue doing the same way. So I think that type of domain knowledge on the business can't be replicated with AI, combined with the knowledge of what AI can do. So that's where I see my role as a product manager, is really to understand the capabilities and the potential of all AI products and linking that with the business value. So I think that's for me, I think a new and cool job function, because not everyone knows all about AI capabilities, and also linking that to making sure that banks make more money at the end of the day.
Is AI coming from my job question? Are we getting into it? Because that's the question everybody has.
I thought
right?
the conversation was taking us there. I thought I'd jump right in.
I just want to make sure that we're not there's not going to be the question later. We're going to get into it now.
Go for it.
Here we go. Okay, we're going to get into
AI
it.
coming for our jobs?
Okay, so
let's hear it, Nick.
Here's the short answer. No. No. Right? Yeah, that's all. Yeah. That's all I'd say. No. Listen, here's I stole this quote, so don't attribute it to me, but I use it a lot because I really like it. AI is not going to replace humans. Humans who use AI are going to replace humans who don't. Right? Everybody needs to use the tool. AI is not coming for the job. There are a couple jobs that are probably going to go away, right? But for the most part, and we know this from history, right? If we classify this as an industrial revolution, which I personally think it is, right? And we've had several in recent history. So we go back to the 19th century and the factory, in the United Kingdom, then later the steam engine, later nuclear, then the internet. Mobile maybe is a half of industrial revolution, and now AI, right? All of those events in history were preceded by fear of, oh my God, this is it, I'm losing my job, followed by an immense elevation in GDP and job creation, right? The jobs changed for sure, but there were not less of them after there were more of them, right? I have no reason to believe this isn't true. Again, the jobs are going to change. I do think actually that humans stop writing code for the most part. Right? I think that doesn't mean you shouldn't know how to code. Doesn't mean you shouldn't understand what's happening under the covers. But I do think that within a decade, a software developer's job is to babysit an agent that's writing the code, and to understand what to tell the agent to go do, and to understand when the agent has successfully completed the job and what to do next. Right? It's maybe more like an HR partner to your agent than you are a software developer. But you're still going to have to understand, this is the key point, and this is the key point for any job. You still have to understand what should be done. Right? So a human still has to figure out here's what we could do, here's what we would do, what should you do, right? That will always be the dominion of the human, right? And human may choose to offload that to an AI at various points to decide, listen, you just take this for now and I'll figure out later. But at the end of the day, that is always going to be our dominion, and every job requires somebody to know, what should we do here? right? And so I think that the key thing is to use the tools, leverage them, be one with them. There's a great article if you want to go after this and just Google the term jagged frontier. It's a really good article about sort of how AI is coming into the industry right now, how people are using it. Jagged frontier refers to sort of the inconsistency of the cutting edge of technology. Sometimes it works great in areas, sometimes it doesn't work great, and then in sort of you're figuring it out as that technology is developing, right? And that article also references these terms I love called cyborg and centaur. Right, both are ideas that the human and the AI are sort of like kind of coming together. But the question is like, in what way? What works for your workflow? A cyborg suggests that you sort of are like, you kind of use it for everything. Like you're kind of like, everything you do has an element of it, but there's an element of you as well in that. A centaur suggests that like some things are just completely the dominion of AI, and some things are completely the dominion of the human, and you sort of have to figure out how to manage both of them together. Each is fine. It's like, what's your workflow? How are you going to pick up that tool and absorb it into whatever you do in your day-to-day and make that part of your life. But do that, because in a few years, if you don't, it's going to feel very strange. No pun intended.
We have a question in the audience.
Amazing. So glad you guys are jumping in.
Absolutely.
So I've got a bit of a niche question. So if you don't know it and it's a little bit too narrow, just let me know. But I'm a data science student, and I'm particularly interested in like experimental design, like A/B testing and causal inference methods. With the rise of AI and less reliance on coding, do you see that area growing?
Growing and changing, right? I think that the technology and sophistication behind that technique is going to change immensely for sure. Still has to happen though, right? Because at the end of the day, there's going to be a human making a decision about buying a thing or investing in a thing or reading a thing or whatever. And somebody has to figure out how to surface that, right? And decide that the human liked this better than the other thing, right? Make that choice, right? And so maybe the AI is more efficient at that or more powerful at that or whatever. But at the end of the day, somebody still has to look at it and go, okay, yeah, this worked better.
Cool. Thank you. Also, other questions from the audience? Anytime. Just raise your hand. That was great. Oh, we have another one. Oh my God. Yes, please.
And with a lot of the developments that are happening in the next few years, how long do you think software developers, and I work in QA, but will continue to use prompt engineering as we're moving from this engineering, from code into models and then transitioning into models, creating other models?
Is this another AI coming for our jobs question?
No, just to understand better about how the job will actually be changing in the next.
So prompt engineering refers to really how you're speaking to the LLM in natural language. It's not coding, right? So anybody can do prompt engineering. But so take a step back, unpack for a second. What is a large language model, right? It is essentially a million monkeys on a million typewriters, right? You know that Shakespeare phrase, right? Eventually you get Shakespeare, right? It's just a statistical model that is calculating, based on a set of words, what is the probabilistically most likely next word to come in that sentence, or half of a word, right? It's just computing a string of letters that it believes, based on probability, is the most likely string of letters that you want to see, right? That's all it's doing, right? So from that perspective, prompt engineering is trying to figure out how to feed the model the right set of letters to have it feed you the right set of letters back, right? And it just happens to be in natural language, right? So I think the way it's going to change is that it'll get easier and better. Right now, prompt engineering has to exist because oftentimes the first thing you say is not going to get the model to do what you want it to do. You have to kind of tell it a few times, and you have to kind of know, okay, what do I need to do is a chain of thought technique here? Do I need to give it examples? Do I need to do some few shot prompting? What do I need to do to get it to like respond the way I want it to respond, right? In time though, and we kind of see this already happening live, right? With like, ChatGPT 4.5, Claude 3.7, like all the Gemini Pro 2.5 is really good. Don't sleep on Gemini. All of them are getting better and better at inferring from less and less words from you what you actually mean, and then therefore getting better and better at coming back with the right thing, right? So I think you give that some time to mature, and at some point, prompt engineering is not really a term. Well, remember we used to call that prompt engineering? Like, yeah, we used to have to really work at how to speak to the stupid machine, right? But now it can just like read your thoughts, like, right? Or whatever's going to happen in 5 years. But the point is that I do think it just gets way easier, right? I think all this just becomes way easier, and you don't have to be a technologist to be a quote unquote prompt engineer or whatever to use the technology effectively.
There is more prompt engineering builds up other areas such as cybersecurity and privacy roles that are concerned about the introduction of data poisoning or introduction of other areas. So just just a counterpoint to not just the engineering coding side of it, but there's certainly other growing fields that are surrounding this area just because of prompt engineering being a major
The fair side, that would be prompt injection, right?
prompt injection, yeah.
Yeah, so I was gonna say the barrier to entry for like kind of becoming like a ML engineer, just like any engineer relating to AI, is already like very high, right? You have to have a lot of like mathematical understanding because, as you guys pointed out earlier, like AI is like the current AI is like machine learning, which is very mathematical, right? My question is like, say I'm like a technologist, a student, anyone who just like wants to maybe get interested in, you know, becoming an engineer for AI, like learning how to create these models. Like like you said, big companies like, you know, ChatGPT, Gemini, they're already so advanced. Do you see as like these models, as like machine learning models in general become better and better, do you see that barrier of entry also like growing for future generations, like 5-10 years down the line? Like how hard would it be to become like an engineer for these like models and companies?
I think you might be confusing machine learning engineering and data science. Yeah, because you're absolutely right that data science is a very math-heavy practice, right? And are we recording this? I'm terrible at math. I could never be a data scientist, right? The engineering side of it, quite the opposite, I would say. Certainly less math. I mean, every engineering wrote a little bit of math, but the tools are so much better now, right? Like, you know, if I say to you, like, as maybe you were one of my developers, said, hey, I need you to deploy a new model to production that can recognize a face. Doesn't know what face it is, just has to know that it's a human's face and tell me yes or no, it's a human's face, right? You could get that done in a day with a pretty basic engineering background, meaning that you could take an existing off-the-shelf open source model, stitch it together with some test data that you found off Instagram, and use a ready-made set of build chains that come out of AWS or GCP or whatever your flavor is, and deploy something that works to production pretty simply without any math whatsoever, right? And that's today, right? So going back to what I was saying earlier about like the innovation of DeepSeek and sort of how models are developing over time to be more productive, I go back to what I said earlier, which is I think in 5 or 10 years, I think your mom can deploy a new model. You know what I mean? Seriously, like I think it becomes like as easy as prompt engineering and saying like, hey, I need you to make me a new model that does this. It goes, okay, no problem. And then a couple minutes later, you have your own custom model. I think that's soon.
I have a quick follow-up question on that, actually. So if you could build and deploy a model super quick, could we also deploy a model that, if we're saying recognizes human faces, that recognize human faces of all colors really quickly? And whose responsibility is it to manage the bias in the data?
I love that question. Okay. Yeah, okay, I'm going to get into it. So when I joined Clear about 3 years ago, on day one, I sat in with our senior leadership team and I said, listen, I am not going to be the CTO that has to get on public media and talk about how we couldn't recognize a black person's face in the airport because we trained bad models. We're going to be in front of that, and we're going to make sure that we are, that we are equitable, and that we've thought about that in our technology. Yes, it is our responsibility, right?
The creators of the model.
Yes,
Cool.
yes. However, it's not trivial, right? And that actually does have more to do with math, strangely enough, right? And I'm speaking specifically about facial recognition now, right? Versus other kinds of biometrics that have other kinds of problems, right? So, for example, irises have no demographic bias issues whatsoever, but they require a special camera, right? So that's a trade-off you have to make. With facial recognition, that's demographic bias is a potential issue, right? And it has to do with how I'm going to try not to get too technical here, but when you do facial verification, what's actually happening under the covers is that you're taking an image of a face and you're turning it into a set of numbers, right? That set of numbers, strangely enough, is actually what you see in the movies. If you see a movie where there's somebody's doing like facial verification on a screen and you see like a face with a bunch of like lines on it, that's real. That's actually how it works. Like the numbers I'm talking about are the distance from like this eyebrow to this eyebrow, from this thing to this thing, from here to here. It's 128 versions of that, all captured into a vector, right? Then they get stored somewhere. And then the recognition part is then doing that again and just matching everything, going, okay, this matches to Nick. Okay, this is Nick, right? That's basically how it works. So the problem with that is when you have a bunch of faces and you plot them like on a histogram, what you'll find naturally is those vectors line up across different sort of cohorts, right? So what that would look like if you were to sort of plot it on a graph is that you'd see like all the black people over here, and you see like all the older people over here, and like see all the women over here, right? And it would kind of naturally sort of congregate on this histogram, right? So what that means then is when you go to look that up in a vector, it's much easier to accidentally pick the wrong one because they're all very clustered together, right? And so there are actually some fairly novel techniques you can use within this technology to defeat that, right? And one of them is actually just very simple math, it turns out, right? And what it is you overlay essentially a hash on top of that, and you take that cluster and you spread it to the wind, right? You kind of put it everywhere, right? The vector math still works the same. It doesn't matter where it is in the sort of the set, right? But if they're not all clustered together, then the likelihood that you're going to run into the wrong person or the wrong sort of match is like infinitesimally low, right? So there are ways to do it. Those are pretty newer and novel ways. So it is so I don't want to sort of trivialize the idea that this is like a really easy problem to solve, because it's not. But it is the responsibility of people who are building these models to solve the problem, in my opinion.
Cool. Thank you. Peggy, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the challenge with a lot of the open tech companies that are building these models, do they have responsibility for negative outcomes versus companies that don't have the resources to build a large language model, so they're purchasing third party. So this is I think we're opening up a whole ethics debate on who has a responsibility, right? So my answer is both. Certainly, I hold OpenAI accountable for their technology, but also I think companies that are utilizing these open sources also have to take the rigorous review. And a lot of companies are creating ethics councils, AI governance councils, really to ensure that the same privacy aspect of what data is actually going in and being utilized. And so ensuring that you're not accidentally asking your ChatGPT, like, what's the salary of my CEO? Like, how much does Nick make? It clear. I want to know. And that has actually happened before, right? Just bad data goes in and the prompt doesn't have that security layer to filter that out. So I think that this is another whole interesting aspect of ethical responsibility that lawyers love to get into. And again, the legal field is all over this. And especially if you follow in the United States, many states have privacy regulations. Colorado is one of the strongest ones that are coming out that really protects and ensures the AI algorithms are done in an ethical, responsible way. And I really respect that. And I wish that there was more AI regulation in place. Regulation doesn't mean...
Coming.
Well, I don't know about that.
I never got around to Facebook.
I'm talking about federal regulation as well. But, be aware of that, right? Because if you have families in Europe or in Australia, other regions that are more AI regulation based, especially the risk outcomes that come out of AI. I think that's something that impacts everyone, regardless of whether or not you're in technology. So it's a big question, and it's our responsibility as to push back and to make sure we question and validate any type of input and output that comes out of these models.
So, any more to say about regulation is coming? / also just to follow up, because we were talking about ethical obligations for people who build the model. What about people who use the model?
I like Peggy's answer. I think everybody's responsible.
I like that.
I can't speak to the regulatory leanings of the current federal administration, but certainly at the state level, there's a ton of regulation coming. Almost every state has something going right now. And I don't know who's going to win exactly. Certainly, I think the EU is also going to influence a lot of regulation because they have a ton of regulation also going. Although, by the way, I think that's generally a good thing. But how it's going to sort of land and like sort of like who's going to sort of win and like what's going to be sort of the, every time there's like one of these kinds of things. I mean, think about even the internet, right? Like we're still kind of figuring out the internet. Like we're still just now talking about, should we check people's age on the internet and maybe protect some kids? Like, right? Like that's still happening and the internet's 30 years old, right? So we're going to be in this for a little while until we kind of even out and get to the right spot.
The internet, technically younger than AI. Did you know that? 1955 versus the 1960s. Do we have, over here.
The concerns that you're kind of talking about in terms of regulations don't feel new. I feel like we've seen that with any sort of industrial revolution. But this is different, to Nick's point, this is different. I'm wondering how from each of you, like what do you think will change about computer science and data science degrees in the next 10 years?
What will change about computer science, data science, and both of you working in industry and you do hiring, like what kinds of skills are you looking for? How will that change? What do you think?
I think the foundations of, for me, computer science, engineering, the technical skills that you learn, and even the thinking skills, like problem solving skills. For me, I don't see that changing. I think it's actually more you need to learn in terms of understanding and learning the new technologies. For me, I think it's constant learning. Fortunately, you can't just graduate and give up on learning, fortunately. But I think that for me, when I look at data science or data analyst candidates, it's not just what they know technically, but also how they can articulate the data and business problem well, and how they can present the solution in a way that a non-technical person can understand it. Again, this is my non-technical way of judging people, but it's really about how do you simplify these hard concepts that most business executives do not understand, statistics, right? So but how do you explain it and tie it in a way that makes sense from a business speak? So I think that type of communication is the differentiator. Not necessarily it's going to be different in 10 years, but certainly what's important today, I would say.
Say what you said again about after college.
Continue learning. Never stop learning.
Yeah, that's an important and very, very important. If there's nothing else to take from this entire conversation, it's that, right? And I think that's the answer to how the job changes and how I think about hiring in the market as well, right? Because engineering is a discipline of learning, right? The technology changes all the time, especially, my God, if you're a front-end engineer, you have to learn a new framework every 5 minutes, right? I mean, there's constantly new evolution, right? So the job of an engineer is to learn what's happening, adopt the best tools of the moment, and then apply them to the problem, right? Rinse, repeat. So you have to be able to learn, right? So when I'm thinking about hiring, and this doesn't change with AI or anything, in my opinion, like if I'm thinking about hiring, I'm thinking about can you work with other people and can you learn new things? Those are the two things I care about, exclusively, right? If I need you to know Java and you don't know Java, I can teach you Java, right? I can teach you Java in a weekend. It's not hard, right? I can't teach you how to not be an asshole. I can't teach you how to want to be curious about things. I can't teach you how to work with other people. Those are the things I need you to know already, right? And I can teach you Java or whatever, or what the new AI tool or whatever it is, right? So those are the things that are important. I think that will be important no matter what the situation or what the revolution.
On behalf of everyone in this room who works in higher ed, I want to thank you for saying that learning is important. That was wonderful. I think we have 2 questions. Oh, wow, 3. Fantastic. Let's do this row and then go back there.
So I used ChatGPT today to write some ad copy that I would have belabored over for hours. It took 15 minutes.
Amazing.
It was amazing. I was very happy about it. Yeah. What's going to happen with all that extra time? Like, everyone's doing that. Like, what does that mean? Like, what is it? Does it mean a 4-day work week? Does it mean increased? Please. But like,
well, how did you treat that time today? Did you put on your time card or?
Well, I mean, I work at a startup, so I just moved on to the next thing. But
yeah, great question.
But it's not just it's one thing when it's just me at a 12-person startup. It's another thing when it's this whole room or a whole generation. And
Nick, you mentioned how this is like another industrial revolution, like another revolution.
I was just about to refer to that.
We went from a 6-day work week to 5 day, 5 day.
So if it's a fun thing to do is to go just use Google or whatever and go back and kind of look at if you can find older news articles. Somebody in the 1930s asked the exact same question about cars and horses. Well, now that it's so much easier to get around everywhere, we're going to do all that extra time. Nobody's going to work anymore,
all
right?
This leisure time.
Yeah, right. So, but that never worked out to be the case, right? That's why I say confidently, after this industrial revolution sort of settles down, we will see more productivity, more jobs, more things happening, not less, because humans always do more, right? So the productivity will come in other forms. It'll come in other applications of the tool. It'll come in developing new tools, whatever that looks like. It's not going to be a 4-day work week, I guarantee you. Yeah. That's not how humans are wired.
Because humans always want to do more, and because capitalism, I think, is
Well, I mean, that's the pessimistic
That's
viewpoint
the-
on it. Obviously,
yeah,
optimistic
yeah.
viewpoint is that we're builders and creators
we are
as a
builders and
species,
creators.
right?
Absolutely.
I think there's studies they did in England about efficiency. They have all these companies who race supporting and they did in fact, whether or not
They did better,
they
yeah.
did better. Like I'm
Yeah,
not saying that
absolutely.
America's set up to believe that. That is it.
But so,
Yeah.
by the way, and I believe that, by the way, but that's less how's AI going to change our work and more to do with sort of a culture, right? Like that could be true with or without AI, in my opinion.
Peggy, anything to add?
No, I agree completely. I think humans, even with more time, will think of more problems to solve and be more creative. Think of it there'll always be another challenge, I think, that we'll fill our time with.
Great, thank you. I think Mick had a question, and then Alex.
Yeah. So if we assume that over the next decade we'll have increasingly better models that are capable of, I don't know, let's say writing 20,000 lines of code, how do we train the next generation of engineers? What sort of skills do they need, and how do we teach them those skills? Because I can imagine a world in which, if developers not writing code, they're not getting down to the bare bones of Java. They never develop the skills in Java, and they never develop the critical thinking skills to be able to optimize that code. Obviously, we don't necessarily write machine code, we don't write assembly, but, if there is a need for those skills, how do we make sure that the next generation has those skills?
That was actually, I was going to respond to something similar to your question as well that you just reminded me I was going to say. So thank you for that. I was kind of smiling because this is going to date me a little bit. I was thinking back to CS65A in my freshman year of Berkeley, go Bears. It was the first year that Java had come out. Java was just published, and they were just going to switch over the curriculum of CS65A to start using Java instead of what was previously C and assembly, right? Consequently, I've never learned C or assembly. I learned Java, right? I remember that we talked about Big Indian and Little Indian. Does anyone even know what that is anymore?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But same time period, movie phone era.
Yeah,
Once again, I remember that.
I remember we talked about it, but I don't remember what it is anymore, right? I remember we talked about bit registers maybe, but like I didn't need to know, right?
No, we
but-
needed to know for the exam.
which I probably failed. Yeah. So my point is that the previous generation did though, right? Actually, ironically, in my case, the previous class did, right? And today, I think if you take that CS65A class, my guess is you probably work in Python, and you probably don't know anything about JVMs or even worry too much about compiling code, right? And you get further and further away. It's actually kind of the interesting things about the realm of computer science is, as history progresses and as humans get more efficient, we build up these sediment layers of the machine, right? So all the way down to the chip, then to the operating system, right? Or actually the chip instruction set, then the operating system, right? All the way up. And you can, if you want to be a deep expert, go as deep into that layer as you want to. But in order to be a productive engineer or developer in a commercial setting, you don't need any of that. And so I think what happens is people do continue to get further and further away from the core of the planet, if you will, right? And are still able to be productive with more and more help from the sediment layers that are below it. But there will still always be and need to be the people who are willing to go all the way down to the trench, if you will, the bottom of the ocean to understand what's happening to build the next model or whatever. So I think it's going to be just a scaled version of what it is today, which is this many people know kind of what that deep level looks like, and a lot of people know how to sort of operate on top of it. And that ratio will probably remain, but just get bigger.
Thank you.
I mean, I would just say, like, tactically, I've seen this in this AI course I've been teaching. 3 years ago, we made these are executives, so they're pretty much past the college undergrad, but we made them 3 years ago, do very technical data business strategies where they actually had to do all the writing, all of the thinking. And this semester, we actually made them just create slides and put it through ChatGPT to generate the 10-page pager. So they definitely leverage AI, but the challenge was to actually critique and validate or invalidate a lot of the assumptions that came out of the 10-pager. So it was actually more difficult, I think, for them using AI because without that strong basic understanding, again, that deep layer that Nick is talking about, if you don't have that strong strength foundation, you can't validate or verify any of the information that came out of it. So I think that for me, it's always about the strong fundamentals that will never really truly go away. The fundamentals, not just the technical, but also how to think. And that's what we're trying to teach in these classes, that I think that, that always has to continually be there. And I don't know if the undergrads teach that well enough, but certainly, Laney, you can
We're
talk
trying.
about. We're trying.
Present company accepted, of course.
Well, I think the crutch is, though, that students do use AI, and how do you kind of remove that, I think, is a challenge.
It can be, yeah, but I think what Nick is saying is spot on, is that we used to be closer to the bare metal what we call the bare metal, like the lower level you get when you're coding. And over time in a typical computer science program, we gotten further and further away from it. But I wouldn't say we're doing less critical thinking or less analysis or less math. So I think we don't need to stress about it. That this is just the next step in that continual change that's been around since Berkeley switched over to Java. I was still doing C++.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's good. Don't stress about it. It's the real answer. It's
Yeah,
just-
yeah,
that's right.
no worries. Everything's cool. You're sorry. Zuri had a question. Alex, I think, had a question as well.
So I just have a question. I wanted to know your opinion on where you think the biggest gap in terms of talent is needed in the next 5 to 10 years. And I do have, I guess, some assumptions that I'm thinking of, which is now with all the generative AI tools, the code generation, they're helping us with the technical portion of a lot of it. So, I mean, I am leaning towards the fact that, we're in an age where AI is more democratized, and part of that is being able to educate the more general public so that everyone's base level is higher. So that's the first part of the question. Where is the main gaps, do you think, in the workforce? But then the second question, which is, I think for me related to the first, is I feel like for a lot of job searchers, especially from non-technical backgrounds, non-CS, non-major who don't have that, they're getting the door shut in their face because that's like the base prerequisite that's required, that you come from a STEM background. So yeah, I think that's the second part of the question, which is, so it's kind of like a catch-22, where yes, you're getting more familiar with AI, you can build some competency, but at the same time, if you're trying to apply for jobs in AI or tech, you're not really going to get those same opportunities as someone who's coming from a more technical background. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on kind of both those questions.
So what job exactly in AI and tech are you applying to? I mean, I think that certainly if it's a pure engineering role, and if you don't have those skills, then yes, I don't think you would have a very good chance of passing through the interviews. So I'm happy to talk about this offline as well. Like, there are, in my point of view, a huge growth in jobs that are adjacent to AI, and I've mentioned some of this, whether it's in cybersecurity and privacy, legal. A lot of business roles are now supporting AI, right? And I think that for me, I think the biggest gap is how do you every company will have a core group of technologists that are developing the AI, but how do you evangelize that AI technology to all the business users? Like, I think there's going to be growth in those type of roles that explain how and why AI is being used versus other technologies, or why these AI tools that are being implemented and now rolled out on your desktop you have to use. And so there's a whole group in terms of education and literacy and evangelism, I think, that is going to be available, that does rely on knowing AI, but not necessarily knowing the technical aspects of AI. And I'm not technical either, but I think that there's many roles that are traditional around being a business analyst, a data analyst, project manager, delivery manager, being able to, those traditional roles around software development are still going to exist regardless of technology and AI, but it's going to be enhanced. So I think that there's opportunities for people with non-technical backgrounds to jump in with, again, basic understanding of AI technology as well.
I totally agree. Going back to what I said at the beginning about humans still having dominion over what should be done, right? Product managers, business analysts, right? Project managers. Those are the folks who are going to decide what should be done, right? And we still need those folks. So I agree with that. The only other thing I'll add is just from a very concrete technical perspective, cybersecurity and data.
Awesome. Sorry, did you have a question? Got the mic? Great.
What was brought up before as far as like what you teach new engineers, in this day and age. So I'm a newish software engineer, and I feel like there's always this conversation about like whether these kids know all of the stuff from before. And I feel like that conversation seems to continue, but with AI, it's even more intense because now it's like, the kids they don't know C++, and now they can use AI to just build out the front end or whatever. And so I think what I wonder, and maybe that's what's already been asked, is like, what are coming away from like whether everyone knows all of the history and knows Java and how Java was built, and like that's probably not as important as hard as that might be to hear, but what are the core skills or core, core skill sets that you would say is really important for software engineers or anyone in engineering to know, like aside from that whole philosophy?
Sounds like you're dealing with some cranky old gray bearded people. Back in my day. Okay, listen, so I think it's something very specific, right? Which is that in commercial software, I'm talking about commercial software development here, right? I'm not working for NASA. We're not we're not, securing cancer. We're building software applications for businesses, right? In commercial software development, there's really only one goal for the team sport, which is to make something that somebody 5 years from now that you haven't hired yet is going to be able to maintain and take forward, right? That's the challenge. For the most part, you're solving well-understood business problems with well-understood design patterns, right? You're using off-the-shelf technology that's proven, and you're assembling it together to solve a business problem. It's not rocket science, right? So the challenges can sometimes come in things like scale, but even that with cloud computing kind of goes away, right? And now to your point, even more, some of the esoteric knowledge that you would maybe require in some cases goes away with AI as well, right? That's in my opinion, just a natural flow of technology going forward. The thing that will still matter though is whatever you're building, how can you build it in a way where somebody else is going to maintain it? Anybody who's got any experience in a commercial software development setting has a moment of like, oh, this Yahoo that built this code before me, like, oh my God, they didn't know what they were doing.
Oh, it's the worst when you find out it was yourself and you forgot about it.
Totally, right? But
so
by the way, as you get further along, you get a perverse pleasure in knowing that somebody else has to deal with your shit code, right? So it goes both ways. But the point is that like that's the real challenge, right? Is that you're going to write some code, and then you're going to move on to some other job somewhere, right? And then somebody else is going to come along and pick that code up that you wrote and be asked to add a feature or make it scale or whatever it is, and they're going to look at that code and go, "What the hell is this?" Right? So that's what I care about. I care about people who understand how to think about that sort of path and develop software that can be done that way.
Oh, another question. We got two? Yeah. All right, let's go there and there.
I knew as a kid, when I grew up, my parents kept telling me, all you need to know is read and write. But after I hear you guys speaking, it's the ability to learn, I assume, right? And if it's the ability to learn, how do I put that in a resume when all they see is a resume? How do I put that in there?
Good question. So it's actually, I wouldn't say ability to learn. It's demonstrated past history of how you learned different things and challenge yourself, like how you learn either different languages or you've done different projects, or how you pushed yourself in what I call uncomfortable situations, and been able to succeed. So I would say when I'm looking at a very junior resume, whether they've done things outside of their major, I love things like that. I love it when people say I took on 5 classes, but I still was able to manage a job, or like they were able to really multitask. So it's demonstrating on a resume how you're able to do different challenging things and how you're able to learn how to learn is the more precise way I would say that.
I 1,000% agree. And actually, I think that relates back to her question about the cranky graybeards, right? Because that's what, like, I think that is, if you were to get one of those people in the corner and it's like, what's your problem, right? And really get down to it, I think that's what they would say is like, well, you didn't like learn all the things and like really show that like you were super invested in this discipline and whatever, right? Maybe you did, you just didn't do it the way they wanted to or whatever. But the point is that we nerds love to gatekeep, right? And like we want you to demonstrate that you've like invested the same amount that I've invested in, so you're allowed to be in this profession, which is bullshit, but it's what we do as humans, right? Right. And so, but the key point, the key truth to take away from that is that it's demonstrating that you've been curious. That's what you can do, right? So like my favorite thing is I'll talk to somebody who's been recently graduated. I'll look at their resume and they don't have a lot to put on there, obviously, but maybe they have a couple of open source projects they were involved in. They put a couple things they contributed to, right? And I'll say, oh, cool. Why this project? And the answer will come back, I was curious. Best answer.
Better than I was told to do it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Which is the worst answer. Or my parents made me do this.
That's a bad answer to put on your resume. Don't put that on.
A comment first. Thank you so much for the note about to keep learning, because I work in QA, but I've only worked in QA for the past 5 years. And one of the abilities that I was able to transfer over is that curiosity. I knew nothing about coding. I knew nothing about technology. My team gave me a shot basically and was like, do you want to learn? And I said, yes, I want to learn. So for anyone who does not have a technical background, I did not. That curiosity, that drive and ambition to want to keep learning, something that is completely out of your comfort zone will take you very far. And so to that extent, what resources, whether that are articles or books or podcasts that would enhance or add to someone's like just reading repertoire today to just think a little bit more critically as AI continues to become more and more mainstream.
My favorite thing about this AI boom is that the answer to all your questions is more AI.
Sure.
I would skip all the books and all the podcasts, and I would just talk to ChatGPT.
Just practical.
Yeah. Like try this out at home. Go to ChatGPT, take a subject that you're curious about, and say, design me a curriculum. Right? So what you do is you say, give me a 12-chapter curriculum on topic X, right? And for each one of these chapters, give me a prompt to give back to you to expound upon that chapter, right? And then at the end of it, I want you to give me a test of some kind. Like just get, and then you can develop the prompt from there, right? But like use AI to learn about AI.
I have a follow-up challenge question then, because we were also talking about ethics and about privacy and about all these other things that we should also keep in mind. Do you also have other, Peggy, like this is more a question for you about like other resources that you would recommend in order to think critically as we engage with AI as users and consumers?
Yeah, but before I answer that question, I want to answer your first question, which is just to point out that my new role I'm taking is in product management, and I've never been a product manager before. I actually don't have a background in being a technical product manager. So how did I pivot? How did I get a role that actually was not qualified for on paper? I think that demonstrating true expertise in what you are currently good at, plus lots of good networking, lots of good network, and also lots of reading, just reading and learning in that area can make up for, and people, I think, if you network well enough, recognize that you can learn and that you can do a job that I honestly don't think is very difficult. I'm not building I'm not building something, I'm building a spaceship, right? So nothing will break if I don't do a good job. But I think that pivoting into a new career is challenging. And I think that that's the point of this conversation tonight as well. But I would say thinking critically around the privacy space, I follow the newsletter on IAPP. It's a international association for privacy professionals. They write great articles, newsletters. They have a whole certification training program. I follow everything they do. From a cybersecurity, again, these are like ISACA is a great chapter that I join. I follow them. So there are privacy and security organizations that have great resources. I would just start there. And I would also learn as a vendor, former vendor, I would say follow good vendors that are in this space because they're the ones innovating and building solutions. They have the thought leadership that I think is not always mainstream. So I think that that's a good way to use that to form your opinion on what should and shouldn't be done, best practices, by following those types of content. And podcasts, I would say, I listen to every podcast. I listen, actually, I know, but I think I read. Okay, personally, I listen to financial podcasts because I want to know how to invest my money better. But I think that the idea here is not just to learn about AI and your goal is actually to listen to other types of podcasts, learn new things that are outside your day-to-day job, because I think that helps you connect the dots to what you do professionally. That just gives you more perspective. I think that always just staying in the lane of data and is a little boring. So, but being able to learn about and listen to other things, read different types of books, I would say all enhances your knowledge as well.
Awesome. All right, friends, we're going to pivot here to our wrap-up question, though happy to chat offline if folks have more questions that have come up. So I think the wrap-up question that the three of us had put aside has already come up. So here's what we're going to do. We'll do an A/B test here. So I'll give you two options. The original wrap-up question that we have, feel free to say anything about the future of AI. Where is it going? The other option, answer either one or neither, whatever you'd like to do to wrap up. Because we have a lot of folks in here, I think we could tell from the questions, who are in the midst of a career change or considering one. If you have any advice for somebody who's in that position right now.
Okay, so I will answer the question of future of AI. I actually believe that humans will become less in the loop. So what we say today is human in the loop, where we are involved, like supervised machine learning. I actually think the future is human is very minimal, not very much needed. I think that's a lot of danger in that, but that's where I foresee a lot of the automation and algorithm decision-making being so automated, so agentic that there will not be humans validating or verifying any information. And I think that's actually what I'm most scared of, but I think that's a reality that's going to be true in five years, not even 10.
Right on. Bold. Love it.
I kind of see that. I actually even take it a step further. So for example, the reason I came here to be here today is that Mary called me up and said, hey, we're doing an event. Would you be willing to speak here today? That's how it happened today. I think 5 or 8 years from now, Mary's AI agent is going to reach out to my AI agent and say, hey, is Nick available? Right. And my agent is going to look at my calendar and like look at my like Mary relationship score and like be like, no, Nick's not available. Right? And like, you know, give you a polite message. Right. But I do think like that's going to be like, I think that in the same way that everybody carries a phone in the pocket today was a, you know, a very sophisticated computer camera. I think tomorrow everybody's going to have their own personal agent that just does all the crap that they want to do. Go order my groceries, go, you know, check out this dating profile, go, you know, arrange a meeting with this VC, like whatever it is, right? Like it's going to be my agent going off and doing things, interacting with other agents. They're going to be back and saying, okay, boss, meeting set, right? And then you go interact with the human that's on the other side of that other agent. I think that's within the decade personally. I'll answer both questions actually. But I think we actually already answer the other question, which is the advice on making a career switch. And I think it's Peggy said it great, so I'm not going to try to repeat it, but I think it's curiosity, right? It's continuous learning. It's curiosity. It's taking steps outside of your existing sort of bubble, whatever that is, and finding things that are adjacent to it. It's immersing yourself in the community of whatever it is. You know, I said, no, forget the podcast book. Like, I mean, and I stand by that advice, but I also think that Peggy gave really good advice about like, you know, being in the community of what you're doing, interacting with other humans that are doing that too, and absorbing that sort of zeitgeist is really, really important to any sort of intellectual pursuit, I think.
And attend events like this where you get to talk to each other face to face. That was a nice plug, right?
Nice. Beautiful. Wonderful way to end it. Nick, Peggy, thank you both so much. Let's thank our panelists.
Thank you. Well done.